I remembered the click of the pen more than the judge's voice. That was the sound that ended 31 years of marriage. Elara sat across the courtroom in a pearl suit, pretending to be fragile. Her new attorney, my former golf partner, kept glancing at me like I was already a relic. When the judge awarded her the house, the car, and even my late father's lake cabin, she didn't look at me with pity. She smiled. That small, victorious curve of her lips told me everything I needed to know about who she'd become. Or maybe who she'd always been, and I'd been too blind to see it. "Marshall," she whispered as we stood to leave, "you always land on your feet. Just not this time." I didn't respond. I just buttoned my coat, walked past her, and told myself something I'd once heard my father say. Never fight a storm you can outlast. She thought she'd taken it all. But Elara had forgotten one small, silent detail, a detail worth $7 million. The house was gone, but the foundation was still mine. The apartment I moved into was small enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum from the bedroom. Most men my age would have drowned themselves in bourbon or bitterness. I chose black coffee and silence. That night, I unlocked an old fireproof box and pulled out a leather folder marked Private Trust, 2004. It was the same year Elara and I started fighting about my work hours, the year I decided to protect my future quietly. The account inside had grown over 2 decades, seeded from my earliest business days before I ever met her. I logged in and stared at the numbers glowing on my laptop screen. $7,843,112. I didn't smile. I just said softly, "You didn't take everything, Elara. You just took what you could see." She had her victory. I had my seed money. Every morning, I walked past her new house on Crestwood Lane, my old house. Her new man, Trevor, washed my car in my driveway, shirtless and smug. He'd been a junior consultant in my company once, all charm, no depth. I hired him. She kept him. The irony wasn't lost on me. I never stopped walking. Instead, I started buying. Through proxies, shell LLCs, clean contracts that left no fingerprints. An apartment building here. A construction firm there. And one property that made me pause when I saw the listing, the house next door to hers. I bought it anonymously through a holding company nobody could trace back to me. Every evening, from the upstairs window, I could see the lights from the house that used to be mine. If she wanted my world, I'd just build another one right beside hers. 2 months later, she called. "Marshall," she said sweetly, "I think we should have dinner." Closure, maybe? Her voice carried that practiced warmth she used when she wanted something. I met her at the Lantern, the restaurant where I proposed to her in 1991. She wore red, her victory color. Across the table, I saw Trevor pretending to be the kind of man I used to be. Elara talked about peace, healing, and moving on. Trevor talked about a promising new investment they'd found, some tech startup that was about to explode. I sipped my wine and asked who the investor was. He smiled, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world. "Some new group, MK Adler Holdings." I chuckled, slow and quiet. "Sounds like a solid name," I said. They were investing in me, and they didn't even know it. Weeks passed. Headlines started appearing everywhere. MK Adler Holdings acquires Northside Tech. New power player emerges in Silicon Valley. Elara's lover bragged at parties about getting in early. She told her friends she'd finally outsmarted me financially, that she was done living in my shadow. Meanwhile, every share they bought, every cent they poured into that company, tightened the rope they were holding. I didn't touch a single thread. I just waited, the way a seasoned sailor watches a storm come toward him, not to run, but to guide the wind. They thought they'd beaten me once. They didn't realize they were building my empire back with their own hands. I never meant for Elara to notice the company's name, but she did. One afternoon, she called. Her tone was different this time, softer, uncertain, almost afraid. "Marshall," she said, "Trevor wants to meet the board of MK Adler Holdings." Elara said, "He thinks it could be a game changer for us." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the city skyline. "Does he, now?" I told her I'd see what I could do. Then I called my assistant, Nora, my only real ally left from the old days. "Set up a meeting," I said. "Make sure they sit across from me. But don't use my name until they walk in." I could already picture their faces when they realized who MK Adler was. If betrayal has a price, I was about to make them pay in silence. They arrived early, dressed like power players, but their eyes darted around the boardroom like children in a museum. I waited behind the frosted glass until Nora nodded. Then I walked in. Elara froze first. Trevor's smile collapsed second. "Marshall," she stammered, her face going pale. "Mr. Adler," I corrected gently, taking my seat at the head of the table. I slid a contract across the polished wood surface. "You wanted to be part of my company? Consider this your chance, as investors." Their hands shook as they signed, trying to mask their panic. They thought the deal saved them. In truth, it tied them to me, legally, financially, and permanently. I should have felt satisfied. I didn't. That night, I sat by the window of the house I bought beside hers. The lights in her kitchen flickered, power trouble. A simple fix, unless the property deed said otherwise. I called my lawyer. "Pull the file on 17 Crestwood Lane," I said. "Tell me who technically owns it." An hour later, he called back. "Funny thing," he said. "The last refinance was in both your names. She never removed you from the title." I smiled into the darkness. The house she took still legally half mine. She took my heart from that house. I'd take the walls around hers. I went back through old documents one night, curious how deep her deceit ran. That's when I found it, a hidden clause in our divorce settlement. She had declared a joint savings account closed. It wasn't. Inside it sat $412,000, transferred quietly a month before the divorce. My signature was forged. The handwriting? Trevor's. I checked twice. I'd once approved his promotion using the same signature sample. She stole my wealth with his hand. And I'd make sure they lost both. I didn't confront them. I didn't need to. Instead, I called the bank's fraud division and let them do what they do best, follow signatures. 2 days later, the news broke. Corporate fraud investigation targets prominent couple linked to MK Adler Holdings. Elara called me in tears. "Marshall, they're saying things that aren't true. Please, help us." I let her voice shake through the receiver before saying calmly, "You wanted independence, Elara. This is what it looks like." Then I hung up. For the first time in 30 years, she needed me, and I wasn't coming. I didn't plan to see Elara again so soon. But fate, it seems, has a wicked sense of timing. 2 weeks after the fraud investigation began, Nora walked into my office holding a cream envelope. "From Mrs. Adler," she said, eyes unreadable. Hand-delivered. Inside was a handwritten note. "Marshall, please. Let's talk over dinner. Just us. No lawyers. No press. I owe you an explanation." I almost laughed. An explanation, after she drained my life dry and left me standing in the ruins? Still, curiosity is a strange addiction. So I went. The restaurant was dimly lit, the same one we used to celebrate our anniversaries at. She'd chosen that on purpose. She looked smaller somehow. Her confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet desperation she couldn't mask. "Marshall," she began, voice trembling. "I didn't know Trevor forged your name. I thought you'd moved the money yourself." I stared at her for a long time. You married a thief and didn't notice the fingerprints? She flinched, but didn't cry. I just want to fix this. I sipped my wine slowly. Elara, this isn't something you fix. It's something you survive. That night, she didn't realize she wasn't talking to the man she betrayed. She was negotiating with the man she'd created. The next morning, I made a call to a man named Rhett Calloway, an old contact from my corporate years, a reputation architect. Rhett didn't deal in lies. He dealt in truths, the kind that ruin people when placed in the right hands. Marshall, he said, you want exposure or extinction? Neither, I replied. I want equilibrium. We met in a downtown bar that smelled of bourbon and regret. I handed him a sealed folder, screenshots, documents, bank statements. Rhett grinned. You always were methodical. You want me to leak it? Not yet, I said. Wait until she blinks. Because the moment Elara tried to save her name in public, the truth would bleed out like ink in water, and everyone would see what she'd done. I wasn't going to destroy her reputation. I was going to let her do it for me. 3 nights later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Rhett's voice was sharp. Marshall, she's on air tomorrow, an interview. She's about to play the victim. I smiled. Of course she was. That was Elara's final act, the suffering ex-wife routine. But she'd forgotten one thing. Our home security system. When she moved out, she never disabled the cloud storage, and those recordings were still mine. One file in particular stood out. Dated 2 weeks before the divorce was filed. I pressed play. Her voice, low and urgent. Trevor, if we move it now, he'll never trace it. The lawyers will believe it was his bonus payout. Trevor replied, laughing. By the time he figures it out, we'll be living in Santa Barbara. I leaned back in my chair, the sound of their laughter echoing in my study. Tomorrow, when she opened her mouth on national television, I'd make sure her own voice answered back. The studio audience didn't know what hit them. Elara sat under bright lights, wearing remorse like a designer perfume. Marshall was a brilliant man, she said softly. But he changed. The money changed him. I watched from my office, calm as a surgeon. Rhett texted me one word. Now? I sent one back. Play it. Seconds later, the interview was interrupted by a strange sound, a recording playing through live feed. Her voice. Trevor's laughter. The hosts froze. The audience gasped. Elara's face turned white. The broadcast cut to commercial, but the damage was done. By nightfall, every news outlet had the clip. Ex-wife caught admitting fraud on live TV. For years, she controlled the narrative. Now, her own words were my alibi. I thought victory would feel louder. Instead, it was quiet. The next morning, I stood on my balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise wash over the city. My phone buzzed, a message from Trevor. You win. She's gone. She left everything behind. I never meant for it to go this far. I stared at the screen, unmoved. Later that day, my attorney called. Marshall, the investigation's wrapping up. They found the missing funds, in her mother's trust account. We can recover nearly all of it. All of it. But recovery wasn't the point anymore. It was about balance. And as I looked out over the skyline, I realized I didn't just take back what was mine. I took back the dignity she tried to strip from me. But I still had one last move left, the kind that would turn forgiveness into legacy. Just when I thought the dust had settled, a thick envelope arrived at my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a letter written in trembling cursive. Mr. Adler, my name is Ginevra Holt. I used to work for your ex-wife at the Charleston office. You don't know me, but I know what she did with your inheritance. Inheritance? I didn't have any, or so I believed. The letter went on. Before she filed for divorce, Mrs. Adler visited a lawyer here. She claimed power of attorney on behalf of your late brother's estate. She transferred the remaining funds, over $1.8 million, into a hidden trust under her maiden name. My brother, Caden, had passed 15 years ago. The trust was meant for his daughter, my niece, Eleanor. And Elara stole it. The betrayal, somehow, still had layers. That night, I realized my revenge wasn't over. It was only halfway home. I flew to Charleston the next morning. It rained the entire time, one of those slow southern rains that sound like secrets. At Caden's old office, I met a man waiting by the door. He held a red umbrella, wore a linen suit, and introduced himself as Mr. Virgil Price, a private financial investigator. I was hired by Elara 6 years ago, he said. She told me she wanted to secure her husband's assets in case of emotional instability. I almost laughed. And by secure, she meant steal. Virgil handed me a drive. I kept copies. Something told me this would matter one day. Inside the drive were records, old emails, transfers, and a signed directive naming Elara as trustee of my brother's estate. Forged, of course. But there was more. Attached correspondence from Trevor, 2 years before Elara even met him publicly. They'd been planning long before I ever saw the cracks. Their love affair wasn't born from passion. It was built from calculation. I returned home and sat in my study, spreading out every piece of paper, every photo, every bank document across my oak table. From above, it looked like a battlefield. Or a chessboard. For months, I'd been reacting. Now, I was about to make the move that would end the game. I called Rhett. Remember that file you said could bury anyone? He chuckled. You're finally ready? Yes, I said. But this time, we're not going after her name. We're going after her silence. Together, we drafted an agreement that would make Elara's lawyers freeze. If she confessed to her crimes privately and transferred restitution to my niece, I would withdraw all public claims and stop the investigation. It wasn't mercy. It was controlled restoration. When I sent the document, I knew she'd never sign it, but she'd be desperate enough to try to rewrite it. 2 days later, her attorney called. Mr. Adler, Elara is willing to negotiate. I almost smiled. The tone was cautious, diplomatic, the way people sound when they're negotiating from a cliff's edge. But when the documents returned, I noticed something strange. A small addition buried in the fine print, a clause giving her access to a dormant joint investment account. The same account where I'd hidden what she thought she stole years ago. I'd left it open on purpose. It was bait. And she took it. That night, a digital alert buzzed on my phone. $1.2 million transferred to a Cayman holding account. The proof I needed. She'd just committed the same crime twice, and this time, the trap was recording. I didn't want to be there when it happened, but life has a flair for symmetry. Elara was attending an art gala downtown, surrounded by the same high society crowd that once toasted her as the perfect wife. When the federal agents walked in, the violins stopped mid-note. The whispers started, the lights seemed too bright, and she froze, eyes locking with mine from across the room. There was no anger left between us. Just inevitability. They led her away quietly. No struggle, no scene. Later that night, I stood in the same gallery, staring at a painting she once loved, a cracked marble statue titled The Restoration. And I realized that's what this entire ordeal had been. Restoration. Of truth. Of peace. Of myself. But there was still one more secret left to uncover, one she never meant me to find. A week after Elara's arrest, my lawyer called. There's something the agents found in her office, he said. A storage key. Belongs to a private vault downtown. I drove there myself. The clerk hesitated when I gave my name. Sir, the account was registered under Keene Holdings. That's your middle name, right? Inside the vault were photographs. Dozens of them, of me, Elara, and Caden. My late brother. But one photo stopped me cold. It was dated 6 months before his death. Elara was standing beside him. Hand on his shoulder. Smiling. She'd known my brother. Long before she met me. The betrayal hadn't started with my marriage. It had started with my bloodline. Among the photos was a small flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop, and an old audio file began to play. Caden's voice. If anything happens to me, check the joint account. I made the mistake of trusting the wrong person. Then a woman's voice, unmistakably Elara's, whispering, "No one will ever find out, Caden." My chest went still. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd stolen my brother's peace, maybe even his life. I called Virgil Price, the investigator. I want everything you have on Caden's case. He hesitated. Mr. Adler, I think you should prepare yourself for what you're about to learn. For the first time in months, my revenge felt small compared to the truth. The investigation revealed what I'd been too blind to see. Caden's company had gone under weeks before his death. And his business partner? Trevor Kincaid. The same man who became Elara's lover. They'd worked together once, investing in offshore properties. When the company crashed, the money vanished, absorbed into the same network Elara later used to siphon mine. It wasn't random. It was all one operation. I sat alone that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking of how far betrayal can stretch when greed disguises itself as love. Elara didn't ruin my life out of spite. She did it to finish what she and Trevor started 20 years ago. The truth didn't bring me anger anymore. It brought clarity. I wasn't going to destroy her further. I was going to close the circle. With Rhett's help, we created a media statement, calm, factual, perfectly worded. Marshall Adler has chosen to donate all restitution from the case to a foundation in his brother's name, the Caden Adler Trust, supporting families betrayed by corporate fraud. The press ate it up. Elara's story was no longer just about scandal. It was about redemption, mine and my brother's. I didn't need her ruin. I needed peace. And for the first time, I had it. The day my statement went public, I received one last message, from the prison phone line. Her voice was soft, distant. Marshall, I never meant for Caden to die. It was supposed to be an accident. I closed my eyes. You've said enough. But before she hung up, she whispered something that froze my breath. You were never my target. You were his insurance. The line went dead. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the city lights fade into dawn, thinking about how fragile trust is, how easily it becomes currency in the wrong hands. And still, I felt grateful. Because I'd survived it. I'd rebuilt not from revenge, but from understanding. The following weeks blurred together in a strange kind of peace. Eleanor, my niece, received the trust fund that should have been hers all along. She cried when I told her about her father's original intentions. Uncle Marshall, she said, I thought everyone had forgotten him. No one forgets the good ones, I replied. We just lose track of their stories sometimes. The foundation launched quietly. No fanfare, no press release beyond the initial statement. Just steady work helping families torn apart by financial betrayal. Every case we took on reminded me why I'd fought so hard, not for revenge, but for restoration. One afternoon, Nora walked into my office with a familiar look. Marshall, there's someone here to see you. I glanced up. Who? Says his name is Trevor Kincaid. He's asking for 5 minutes. My jaw tightened. I hadn't seen him since the arrest. Part of me wanted to refuse. But curiosity, that old addiction, won again. Let him in. Trevor looked like a man who'd aged a decade in months. His suit hung loose, his eyes hollow. He sat down without being invited, hands trembling. "I'm not here to apologize," he said. "I know that wouldn't mean anything to you." "Then why are you here?" I asked. He pulled out a folded envelope. "Because Elara kept one more secret. And I think you deserve to know it before she dies." My blood went cold. "Dies?" "Cancer," he said quietly. "Stage 4. She has maybe 3 months." He slid the envelope across my desk. "She wrote this before her arrest. I don't know what's in it. But she made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to her." I stared at the envelope like it might explode. Trevor stood, heading for the door. "For what it's worth, Marshall, you were right. About everything." Then he was gone. I sat alone with that envelope for an hour before opening it. Inside, Elara's handwriting, shaky but clear. "Marshall, if you're reading this, then the truth finally caught up to me. I won't insult you with apologies. You wouldn't believe them anyway. But I need you to know something. When I met Caden, I was young and stupid and thought money was the same as freedom. Trevor convinced me it was easy. That your brother wouldn't even notice. But he did. And when he confronted us, I panicked. I didn't kill him, Marshall. But I didn't stop it either. The accident wasn't an accident. Trevor tampered with his brakes. I knew. And I said nothing. For 20 years, I lived with that silence. And when I married you, I thought I could bury it. But guilt doesn't bury. It grows. By the time I realized what I'd become, it was too late. I'd already destroyed the only good thing in my life. You. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know the full truth. Not the version the lawyers will tell. Not the version the press will print. The real one. You were never supposed to be collateral. You were supposed to be my way out. But I was too broken to let you save me." The letter ended there. No signature. No closing. Just the raw truth of a woman who'd run out of masks to wear. I sat in the fading light of my study, holding that letter, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness. Not quite. But release. The weight I'd been carrying, the need to understand why, it finally lifted. She'd given me the one thing I'd been searching for all along. Closure. 3 months later, I attended her funeral. Not because I owed her anything. But because Eleanor asked me to. "She was still your wife once," my niece said. "And that has to mean something." So I stood in the back, watched them lower her into the ground, and whispered the only words that felt true. "You're free now, Elara. And so am I." Final. Sometimes, life doesn't give you justice in the way you expect. Sometimes, it hands you a mirror, and asks what kind of person you'll be when the dust finally settles. Elara took my home, my pride, and years I can't get back. But she forgot the one thing she could never steal, my peace of mind. I built myself again, stronger, quieter, and a little wiser. So if you've ever been betrayed, remember, silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. Before we close this chapter, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same, or gone further? Drop your opinion in the comments, I read every one of them. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe for the next story. Because the next one makes this look like child's play. Thanks for watching.